Welcome to the Answer is Yes podcast, where we interview some of the most interesting people that have said yes to opportunities in their life. We hope that through these stories, you can learn to create your own destiny by saying yes along the way. Join us as we explore the new series covering topics such as passion, integrity, and hard work. I'm your host, Jim Riley, and I hope you enjoy these interviews as much as I do. I believe that everyone has an important message worth hearing. Hello and welcome to the Answer is Yes podcast. Thanks for tuning in. As usual, hey, if you've been paying attention to my social media platforms, my newsletters, and probably every other sector I push content out on, I just had a book come out. It is called The Freedom to Say Yes. Please check it out. You can find it on Amazon or through my website link. You can get it. And I talk about stories throughout my life. There's 16 lessons in there and 16 stories, and it's something that's been on my to-do list for the last 10 years. So I finally checked that box off last week. So thank you again for tuning in. Today I've got Sallie Wagner on the line. Good morning or afternoon, Sallie. How are you?
Fabulous. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. I love your background. This is not a recorded video, but I love the background in your Zoom call there. It's got all those wonderful words that you stand behind.
Yes, absolutely. Intentional life coaching and a view from far out into the galaxy. I love it.
I love it. Hey, let's not limit ourselves, right?
Yes.
I had a business coach, David Meltzer, great individual. He actually wrote the foreword to my book. He's out of Southern California. And we were talking about fundraising efforts for the orphanages in Baja that I spend a lot of time with. I said, Dave, I want to raise $100,000 for these orphanages this year. And he looks at me and goes, Jim, why would you limit yourself? Why not an infinite amount of money? I thought, well, Dave, you're probably right. Let's not limit ourselves. So I love that belief. Hey, before we get into what you're currently doing, can you give us some background on yourself? Maybe where business started for you or your college education or what some of the paths that you took in life that you said yes to.
Sure, absolutely. I definitely took the scenic route. In college, I started out in physics and I ended up in theology. So it was kind of physics to metaphysics. Mm-hmm. And in between, I was one of those people who couldn't decide. So I had minors in lots and lots of different things. And I appreciate the breadth of that knowledge because it certainly has helped me throughout my life. My trajectory was I was going to be a professor of theology, master's, PhD, that was it. And then I got distracted, went to law school instead. And I spent the majority of my career on that path. Mm-hmm. A few years ago now, I had the opportunity to say yes to a change, and I started my own business. I saw a need in real estate brokerages, and I fulfilled that need in reviewing contracts for compliance issues. Pretty soon, I joined forces with somebody else who was doing a different part of that. And so we formed a company together. Now we do broker and contract compliance for real estate brokerages throughout Florida. And in all the offices where we do that, we have over 2,500 agents. That translates into over $6 billion in sales volume, averages about 600 transactions a week. Fortunately, I don't touch every single one of those, only the problems. Right. And I also have a real estate school. And along the way, here's the circuitous and scenic part of it. I kind of reignited that interest in the philosophy, the theology, and that side of things, which I'd never really lost anyway. And also the passion for science and what it tells us. And I saw a documentary a few years ago about coaching, life coaching. And I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. And then all those messages that we all tell ourselves, I don't have time. I'm busy. I wouldn't know where to start. I couldn't do that. And it kept at me until I finally said yes. And it was that point where I said, if I don't do this, I'm not going to live. Not that I was going to die, but just that I was not going to live my life. And so I said yes. And that was what changed everything.
Yeah, I'm sure. So you've got a thriving business in real estate, legal practices over there, and you made a creative turn to look at what was really biting or eating away at you. You know, I feel the same. I finally got that book written, as I mentioned. You know, I wasn't going to live a normal life without doing it.
Yes.
How did it feel to go down a completely separate road with this new venture than what you're used to? Because I got to imagine it's night and day difference.
It is very different, and it's I love it. I don't know that you can see this in my background, but one of the lines that I love is live the life that makes you come alive. And that's from a quote from Howard Thurman, who was a mentor to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And he said, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive and go do it, because that's what the world needs. And I just was so firmly convinced that this is what makes me come alive. And I had no choice, truly, except to be that person.
Why do you think it is that people tend to just follow what they're told or what they feel the world is telling them to do, instead of going down that creative path, that path that makes them the happiest, the most rewarding path for them as individuals? Why do we get stuck in those ruts?
We have all this programming paradigms. In my coaching programs, I call it mind apps. Updated the language. We all know what apps do to our phones and our other devices. They slow things down, they drain the battery, they have competing purposes. And we have those kinds of things going on in our subconscious mind, family, society, the world. And they tell us that, well-meaning, they tell us things like, here's what you should do. Here's what you want to do. Well, do I really want to do that? I don't know. And so we end up doing those types of things that we've been programmed that we should do, that we should think are important. I certainly did that. Going to law school, I did what I thought I should do to take care of my family. And we miss out on living the life that we choose and following our own dreams and our own goals. And amazingly, that's one of the top 5 regrets of people at the end of their lives.
Yeah.
I wish I had the courage to follow my own dreams and my own visions for my own life.
So I've got a lot of parents that listen to this show. Matter of fact, I really enjoyed being on the Dad Up podcast recently, and it was all about interviewing dads and some of our struggles. I've got 2 little girls. At what point as a parent do we realize, hey, we got to be careful how we program our kids? How do we catch this early? Because I know as a youth I was programmed to think one way, and I remember specifically when in my head I said, I am not going to do things that way. I'm going to do things my way in a respectful manner. But at what point as parents do we start to realize how important this is?
Oh golly, I think it's before they're born, really. I'm not saying that I've done it perfectly. I feel like I missed the boat in many ways with my son. I have a son and a daughter, amazing individuals. And for me, when my son was younger, I didn't get him because for me, education, learning, I've always been passionate about all of those things. And he was totally different. He was more doing. And now I totally appreciate the doing part of things, right? Because we got to take action. He's an inventor. He has a patent for all kinds of things going on in his life. And my daughter took a different way. And yet both, proud parent here, that both are genius in their own rights. And so I think some of it is maybe ego about, here's what I think my child should be like. And just stepping back, like physically and mentally, emotionally, stepping back from them and understanding who they are as little individuals. My son and his family just welcomed a new baby into the fold, and he is such a unique little person, totally different from the other kids. And to be able to understand that and celebrate all of those differences, right? And it's a challenge because we do have that sense of pride and ownership, so to say, about our kids.
Yeah, I'm just re-looking at that word behind you, says intentional. And I think as we're raising kids, let's be intentional about what we say and do, not to program them in a way that limits their abilities. I think society is so programming as it is. The last thing they need is their parents programming them as well.
Yeah. And I think one of the things we can do is And this is what I coach grown-up people to do. Ask yourself questions and teach children to ask themselves questions and respect their answers. Not necessarily what do you want to be when you grow up, or don't you really want to be a policeman or a fireman or a lawyer or a doctor, or don't plant those seeds, but just ask them, what do you like? What's something that makes you happy when you do it? Mm-hmm. What's a problem that you want to work on when you grow up? And so they start thinking in terms of solutions rather than a particular career path.
Yeah. Okay, so let's shift those gears a little bit. Now you're an adult, realized you've been programmed a little bit too much throughout your life. I mean, it happens to us. But I think sometimes we have that aha moment, like, okay, well, I'm not doing what I love. I should be somewhere else, but I'm in a rut. I'm stuck, burden of life. How do we start to change that?
So the first thing is to become aware of that. I call it successfully discontent. And I lived that life. It looked good on paper, but it didn't feel so good inside. And so recognize that, and then take the next step to ask the questions about, well, what would it look like if I didn't have these constraints? And then what can I do to move in that direction? It may not happen overnight, right? Most of us can't give up everything and just go chase our dreams. And yet we can shift our focus and begin moving in the right direction. Mm-hmm. And we can also take concrete steps to get rid of that programming, identify it, and then change it. And I use a lot of interventions like EFT, emotional freedom techniques, and NLP, Neurolinguistic Programming, to help people with that so that they can kind of get to those levels and really begin to question the programming and make conscious choices about what they really want to do.
I think it's an interesting point that you bring up, that, you start working towards and reprogramming. This isn't an overnight thing. I talk to a lot of people that I coach, and they're like, well, I've got all these bills and these responsibilities and boom, 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 a whole bunch of, reasons why they can't. But what they're not understanding is if they can just start reprogramming a little bit at a time, eventually they'll overcome those challenges and they'll become what they really are after if they're diligent and persistent and patient.
Yes. And what you said is key. They become that. And I think that's the first step. You become that person, mentally, emotionally, internally, and then you begin to express it in the world. And so you can become that person and still be doing what you've been doing, and yet your focus is going to shift and you start doing the other stuff as well as you manifest it into your physical reality.
Yeah. Talk to me about EFTs and NLPs. I mean, these are new terms put in the way that you've described them for many, many people. But let's talk about that for a minute. What does that mean to them?
Yeah, so I won't get into all the logistics of the background and the foundation of those, but it's a way to really accelerate the results that you get. I mean, affirmations are fabulous, right? And we can do affirmations all day and then some, and we may not see real positive lasting changes. We're just making affirmations. And now I've recently heard about afformations, which is a different approach. But we really need to get as much as we can into that subconscious level where all that programming lives. That's our operating system, right? Mm-hmm. And we got to reboot that so we can uninstall those mind apps that we got programmed with, and then install new ones that we want to have in our lives, the ones that we consciously choose. Mm-hmm. So EFT and NLP are ways that we can do that. So you can get rid of all those habits, behaviors, fears, phobias, limiting beliefs, and decisions that are holding you back. And it can be something as seemingly mundane as, oh my gosh, I want to stop biting my nails. Trivial thing perhaps. And yet for somebody who does it, it really affects how we present ourselves in life, right? In our businesses, in our careers, and everything. And when we change something seemingly small like that, then we instill that courage to tackle the big issues. And we can think about